Welcome to Women Don't Do That, where we empower you with inspiration, knowledge, and skills to redefine your boundaries and unleash your potential. I'm Stephanie Minton, founder and CEO of Beacon North Strategies and your guide. Small town girl turned CEO while navigating career, motherhood, ADHD, and chronic migraines. Our conversations range from interviews with visionary women to solo episodes filled with actionable insights. We are your hub for turning what ifs into let's go. Are you ready to redefine your possible? Let's get started. Today's guest is Kaite Burkholder Harris, Executive Director at the Alliance to End Homelessness Ottawa and co-chair of the Ontario Alliance to End Homelessness. We talk about how to build a value-driven career, lead with purpose in burnout spaces, and navigate that tension between doing meaningful work and protecting your own well-being. If you've ever wondered how to make an impact without losing yourself in the process, this one's for you. Welcome, Kaite.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's so nice to have you here.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the chance to chat.
I want to start off with a way for our guests to get to know you better. So, what does life look like for you right now?
So I am a mom. I would say young mom, but that's not true. Geriatric pregnancy. So I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. So a little girl who's 3 and a little boy who's 1. So I've been finished mat leave in January and then had come back to work since then. So it's kind of the lovely mix of chaos and heartwarming moments. But yeah, that's kind of the day to day. So it's kind of that time when every minute is packed in your day between
Mm-hmm.
work and driving and kid and dinner and all those things. So
Yes.
yeah, it's a little bit busy, but it's also really good. Like I'm very grateful to be a mom. It's been like a huge, really meaningful change for me. So
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you made me laugh. I get a laugh when you said geriatric. Um, but
it's true,
it sounds like
35
such
and
a
over.
terrible term, but it is what medically I know that they call it, but it's hard not to feel offended by that.
Yeah, it feels a little mean from the medical community, to be honest. But like nonetheless, that's fine. They're healthy and that's what matters. So,
Yes, yes. Okay. The second question we like to ask guests to really get to know them better is what motivates you to live your best life?
definitely my family. And I think yeah, I think having kids like clarifies a lot of things in life. Like you
Hmm.
really, I mean, this is kind of a standard answer, I guess, but it really does clarify things. And you also get way more emotional faster. Like I think
Mm,
I've always been an extroverted person and like pretty like feelings oriented, but having kids just brings it to the surface in a way that I don't think I'd experienced before.
hmm.
So yes, the idea of like I want to make the world a better place for my kids, but also I think just crystallizes like who am I in the world? Like what am I
Hmm.
contributing to the world? Like what am I modeling? And I think a lot of that is what's been more on my brain, and also all the things I don't model. And I'm like, man, I want my kids to grow up and think this way, but I'm not modeling it right now. So how do I like make those things happen? But I think that is kind of a primary motivation at this stage of life. So. Mhm.
Hmm. What do you think that would have looked like? And maybe this is hard to reflect on, but before you had kids, what do you think you would have said?
I will say, like, my mom and dad were so service oriented. Like, my
Hmm.
dad, I described, he woke up at 5 a.m. in the winter and had snow plowed all of our neighbors by 7
Hmm.
a.m. Like, he
Right.
was so oriented towards serving other people. And my mom was the same way. And I feel like that is the gift that they passed on to me. And I think a lot
Mm,
of people come from places of pain or trauma when there's somebody who's really activated to help. And I often find in conversations, I'm a person who's come from a lot of privilege and opportunity,
mm,
who had that modeled for me and was like, oh my gosh, my job in being a human is to contribute. It is to give back
right.
because I've been so fortunate in my life. So
Mm,
I think that's a lot of what kind of drives me. And I will say, like work-wise, housing and homelessness in particular, I love efficiency. So maybe that motivates me. But to make big changes on a
mhm,
lot of other social challenges, if you deal with housing first, that actually has tons of ripple effects in making all the other problems less bad and in some cases eliminating them. So it feels like I've put my energy in that space because it actually does feel like the thing that can have the biggest impact across sort of the
Mm.
spectrum of things that we have to navigate as humans that are hard.
Wow, that's very impactful. I can appreciate what you shared about the service aspect, and my parents were very similar, and so I have
Oh,
a
okay.
similar outlook on life. And yeah, it's interesting to hear other people's stories as well and how they got there. We're going to talk in a few minutes more about your career in terms of how you got to where you are and what you're doing today. But can you talk a little bit more about that beginning part about what led you started in public health and then eventually ended up working in homelessness? What did that look like?
Yeah, it's funny. I used to be a tour guide at Carleton, where I went to school, and
Love
it
that.
was so interesting because everybody would be like, "I'm going to go into neuroscience, and then I'm going to go into do this and this," and it's like this straight line of a career. And I would always try and like reassure high school students, like, "Don't worry, like nobody's career is linear. Like people go all over the map to get where they want to go, and then they're still growing and blah blah blah." Mine has been the most boring straight line trajectory that one can imagine. But that's also fine. Like it all
Yeah,
kind of
it's
fed.
fine because everybody's is different. And even though lots of
Everybody's
people
is different.
zigzag, some people who are listening will not have
Yes,
zigzagged.
exactly. Exactly. So I like undergrad in social work, did frontline social work. That's what my mom was as well. And then I love that work, but I also just hit the wall of 98% of the challenges that people I was working with were dealing with, it was a systems issue. It was not personal failure, it was a system failure.
Mm,
And I was like, if I really want to make an impact, like I'm going to need to tackle systems issues and work in that space.
mhm,
So I shifted over kind of in 2015, having done a bunch of frontline work, and then was able to really dive into that more systems level stuff. And public health was super helpful for that.
mm,
And that's kind of where I've been ever since. But it's a real pleasure and it's a real gift to be like, oh, I'm totally tapped into a role that like is aligned with how I'm wired. And I think that's not something everybody gets. And I'm so lucky because it really does feel on a daily basis. I'm like, I'm growing and learning, and also like my skills are being used to kind of the most impact they could have, which is just feels so lucky to be in a job like that. So yeah, I love systems. I'm a wonk,
mm.
basically.
So for people who are listening who maybe don't know what you mean when you say systems, what does that mean?
So policy, program design, the way all of the different funding streams at different levels of government and the policies of those different departments, how that all works together to impact the person on the ground. And like really, I'll give an example. So if you are on social assistance of any kind in Ontario, and you go off of social assistance, when you're on social assistance, you have benefits covering. So if somebody's like, I want to work, but the minimum wage job I'm going to get is not going to cover my medication. So I'm not going to go off of social assistance because I won't be able to get my very necessary medication. So
Mm,
things like that, where that's a fixable thing, we can improve that and make that smarter. I'm really motivated to work in that space of
mhm.
here's the big picture policy, here's the experience of the person living it. Now, where in that middle space can we bring them together and fix it?
Katie, one of the things that I appreciate actually about your career path is because like you've worked in that space for a while too, is the real expertise that you bring. Like as somebody who works in government relations and advocacy, and I know part of that is part of your job too, but people's jobs are constantly changing, right? And
Yeah.
as someone who used to work in a not-for-profit, like I've worked in many different fields, and there's value to that too. But it is nice sometimes when you're speaking to someone who really has the depth of the issues and has that history. And so maybe as much as you're looking at it thinking, oh, this is a bit boring, I think it's also extremely important and valuable in so many ways. And at least certainly somebody like me in my career finds that helpful. So,
Yeah.
so thank you
Yeah.
for that.
Oh, I
Um,
appreciate it.
I want to talk more about a job in not-for-profit, you're working in homelessness. Was there a turning point where that work became more of like a personal mission or like driver for you?
I have to say, like, probably stemming from like a very young age, like literally high school and a bit younger, like service was important. And,
Mm,
my mom, I think also a bit of like cowboy service, as weird as that sounds, but like within a very formal professional context. Like my mom worked in a hospital, but she worked in a community mental health case manager within a hospital. So like didn't make sense to the hospital at all, but she basically worked with people in the community, which is what I
mm,
ended up doing later. So when I was a kid, and this would never be allowed today, she actually would pick up a client on her way into town and she would be taking me as well to school. So we'd carpool together. That would
yes,
never happen today, and I realized for many
definitely
reasons.
not. Yeah.
But that and like like she actually did things like feeding, clients cats while they were gone. Like it was just that very
Like
simple stuff,
community.
totally community.
Hmm.
And it's in some ways really unfortunate because I always felt that barrier as a social worker where I was like, at the end of the day, you know that I'm paid to be here. And
Hmm.
that doesn't feel great, right? Like I am here because there's a lack of a community for this person. And so that's really hard. And at the same time, I felt like that kind of service was really meaningful and
Mm.
to do that kind of work. Like I remember I used to work with a guy who lived in a tent in a field. And so every morning I would go and meet him and just like hike through the field and go and not tap on the tent door, but sort of like, okay, we got to get moving and like, here's a coffee. And I just appreciate it's not sitting in an office and doing counseling, and that's
Hmm.
important too, but it's like on our drive together to an appointment, actually we're going to have a really good conversation. And that
Mm.
conversation probably feels safer because we're not looking at each other and we're just doing a normal thing.
Hmm.
And I just really appreciate that kind of support for people. It just feels really grounded,
Hmm.
and practical. And if we're not being practical in meeting people's needs, and we're also, often that's not going to cut it in terms of being able to move forward and to thrive. So, yeah.
Right. And I think, I assume, like given the mission, it's a those jobs can be very challenging, but you know
Mhm.
that you're contributing to something and you're seeing it like as you're doing it, right? Like
Yeah.
driving to somebody to an appointment is very
Yeah.
practical
Yeah.
in terms of seeing how
Hmm.
the help can give. So when you're doing more policy or like some of the systems work, then does that become challenging in terms of do those two things sometimes feel far apart?
They can. I think we're really lucky because at the Alliance, we've hired a team of people with lived experience who
Mm,
do policy, consultation, governance work, and they really inform the work. And it's like
mm,
when we talk about equity, we center the people who have been most impacted by homelessness in creating solutions. And
right.
so, I think that helps us stay grounded. And the Alliance is kind of an interesting body in that we do kind of high level advocacy, but again, we sort of live in that middle space. We are
Hmm.
pretty close to the ground and hearing about what's working or not working. So I think that
Okay.
keeps us grounded. And I've wondered for a while, actually, I'm like, oh, I need to get back into volunteering or just to get back in understanding the kind of current context a bit
Mm,
more because things
right.
change so much in this sector. And I
Yeah.
would say, post-pandemic, but also the last couple years with the drug crisis, it's changed so much. And the challenges that people are facing and the depth of complexity and pain, it is different. And I think
Hmm.
that's something that I understand to some degree in talking with community partners, but to really be back in trying to do some kind of volunteer work and
Hmm.
understanding what that's looking like, I think would be important. So,
Hmm. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the Alliance to End Homelessness Ottawa? And then you also are the co-chair of the Ontario Alliance to End Homelessness.
mhm.
So what do both of these do, and what do you do in your role?
Yeah, so with the Ottawa Alliance to End Homelessness, we've been around quite a long time, actually, like since the 80s is kind of like a ragtag grassroots group. But a number of local service provider agencies said, we need to get together and have kind of a unified advocacy voice with the city. So
Right.
it was really focused on local issues, and, all of them are receiving funding from the city. So it's tougher for them to kind of speak out or push on things. So the Alliance was created, and it literally had only ever been one staff until 2020.
Mm,
And at that point, I think there was a real desire for we need to do things differently if we're going to have an impact. And then also the global pandemic happened.
yeah.
And so that shook people up, I think, in the system in a way that was like, oh my gosh, we can't keep doing business as usual. I mean, it shook everyone up. And so, it really shifted gears then where we have grown the staff and the team and really expanded what we do. So a lot of it has been advocacy, but now we're doing that at every level of government, a lot of government relations work, and then also very public stuff. We launched a citywide campaign called Starts with Home, and that was for the municipal election and really just focused on kind of that big picture. Everybody gets that. Everybody knows that if you want to
Mm-hmm.
have a job, that starts with having housing. If you want to be healthy, that starts with having a safe home. Like it's just so intuitive. And so we really wanted to lean into that kind of everybody does get this. We just need to make it um, accessible for folks to sort of continue to advocate. And then we also do a lot of coordination and trying to support coordination across the sector. We represent 75 agencies in the
Mm.
sector. So we are a
Wow.
member-based organization. And so we're really focused on what interventions in that big picture can actually have a big impact. And then the other part of the work, which is probably my favorite, is we galvanize. Like my job is to get the person who can make a difference over here to do the thing. So what do I need to do to help that person be motivated to do the thing? And so we have something called the Empathy Project, which is like a
Mm.
simulation of having to navigate the local housing and homelessness system. And I could go and give a talk for an hour and a half, or I could have somebody do 20 minutes of this exercise. And hands down, that exercise I have seen be so effective so frequently for people in just
Mm.
getting it and getting it in their gut, not just in their head of,
Mm.
oh, this is what's not working. How can we make things work? We actually
Right.
did it in Newfoundland, and the Minister of Justice attended, and he ended up calling up the organization the following day that had brought us out there and said, there are so many things we can fix that are not legislation, they're not funding, but they're really about how we've designed the whole thing to look. We can design a better system. So let's work on
Mm.
that.
Oh my
So
goodness.
that's a lot of what, if I can help people get it in their gut, this is why we need to change. That stuff's powerful, and that's
Oh,
what makes the difference in moving change forward.
absolutely. Absolutely. And so that's the piece in Ottawa. What about the role on the Ontario
The
side that you
Ontario
have?
Alliance. So we are a coalition. So we have no staff, but me and the other two co-chairs. The three of us do a lot of government relations work and trying to
Okay.
just kind of thoughtfully engage the provincial government in solutions. And we're also member-based. So everyone who is a part of it, it's, community organizations across the province. And we try and do a lot of work with other provincial bodies that are
Hmm.
kind of working in this space, like Association of Municipalities of Ontario, Ontario Nonprofit Housing Association, who are all kind of in this housing homelessness space,
Right.
and do kind of joint advocacy. And I think too, what's cool, there's, nonprofits, but there's also a lot of alignment with private enterprise and,
Hmm.
private landlords right now are working with us on a few pieces. So it's also, I think, I love the work of finding common ground. And it's something that is so doable if you're going to do the work to make it happen and make sure that you're seeing the best in people from the get-go.
Right.
So I really enjoy that work too. And the other two women that I get to co-chair with are just phenomenal,
Oh, that's
amazing, amazing
amazing.
people.
Amazing. I really appreciated what you shared about coordinating and working with others as somebody who advises people about advocacy and how to make a difference. Certainly, one of the basic principles of advocacy, right, is to coordinate and to have shared asks and goals
Mhm.
and more voices asking for those same things. And in many cases, sectors are just not able to do that. It's really challenging.
Yeah,
And at the same time, if they could, they would be more likely to have success.
yeah.
I've had minister staff literally say, if that sector could come back and tell me exactly what they
Mm,
want, I would give it to them, but they can't. Right. And
interesting.
so that just goes to speak to the power of kind of those coalitions and that type of work. So it's really important what you're
Mhm.
doing in terms of making change and obviously based on some good principles, which is great. One of the things I wanted to unpack with you a little bit is about choosing careers in nonprofits or in kind
Mm,
of challenging space in some ways,
mhm,
right? And I find for women, they often care about so many of these social issues and they struggle with, those decisions around, do you make it your job or is your
mm,
job maybe something else and then you volunteer or you're engaged on the side?
mhm,
You've done both. Did that, I mean, I guess, what did that look like for you?
mm.
And any advice you have for people trying to figure out what that looks like for them?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I feel really lucky because I think my life in general, I'm somebody who a lot of things are like there's a lot of synergy in my life where
Mm,
I think different domains kind of reinforce each other. And I know that that's not everyone's experience. So in some ways for me, it felt pretty natural to kind of move in this space. And it's funny, my brother-in-law worked in like the insurance industry, and my family is a family, like extended family too, teachers and doctors and all nurses and all public sector folks. And he talked about going for a dinner one time and the cost of the dinner. And then they went to a Raptors game, and all of my family was like aghast at this. And we were like, how did you? And he's like, guys, I work in the business world. It's a little different. And we just had no concept of it. But I think that, I think public service work is really valuable.
hmm
And depending where you go, like I also think there's this attitude of if I'm in the nonprofit world, if I'm in public service, then I should have bad pay and bad working conditions. And there's a
Mm,
total martyr complex, which
right,
is super messed up and leads to burnout and also leads to people if I'm not there, it will fall apart. And that
right.
doesn't lead to healthy work culture. It doesn't lead to sustainable places. And so just anybody who's kind of wrestling, like, do I want to do this professionally? Do I want to do this just in my spare time? I mean, I think both can be really meaningful. And you hear about people who turn their passion into a job and then their passion no longer is a passion. So like different
Right.
for everyone. But it's interesting because I think that martyr piece, I mean, that can be any sector or industry, but I was at this networking event recently where a guy said, I feel so guilty when I don't respond to all the emails and do all the things. And I was like, I just came back from mat leave. I am so delightfully replaceable. The pressure's off. Like
Right.
another wonderful person, I hold down the fort for two mat leaves at this point, and everything kept working totally fine. And they advanced the work and they did even more. And I just think, yeah, I'm replaceable. And I mean that in the best sense of the word. Like if everything hinges on one person, then we should probably let that thing die.
Right.
Like that's actually not
Well,
sustainable
and
and it's not good.
I think that advice transcends sectors too, right? Because
Yeah.
it is true, regardless of, you can be a very important person and a VP or a CEO, and something happens to you,
Yeah.
you pass away in a car accident, you can bet in short order you are replaced. Like it is,
Yeah.
right? Like that is what happens. And I appreciated what you shared about the mat leave too, because I hadn't thought about that. Like, I wonder if, given so many women, have mat leaves? Like, does that give us a
Hmm.
different perspective on that than,
Mm.
maybe women who haven't had that would have, or how, many men wouldn't have that. So, yeah, that's a very interesting perspective to think about. And I appreciated also what you mentioned about pay because when you're talking about your relative there, in terms of
Hmm.
what that looks like in terms of the types of money they're spending on entertainment, maybe for work situations. And I think that's also an interesting conversation and kind of part of this too, because I think sometimes when people go into not-for-profit, they assume they're going to be paid less, and in many cases they are, but not in all cases. There's some big
Hmm.
NGOs that are paid
Yeah.
really well. There's also people that are paid really well and hate what they do, right? So
Hmm.
it's a whole,
Yeah.
what I was hearing, part of what you were saying there is
Yeah.
like it's different for everybody and it's finding the
Yeah.
right solution for you. But I often think of people who there's a woman I know who runs an NGO and she started it. And maybe she still has a good salary, but she's so talented in her
Mm.
skill sets that I often think like if she was in a corporate environment, she would just be killing this
Yes.
and making so much money. And yet
Yeah.
she's choosing to do this because it's what gives her life. It's what she believes in. It's
Hmm.
her vocation, like
Yeah.
all of these things. And I just think about that dichotomy sometimes about making those
Hmm.
kinds of choices. And society doesn't work unless some of us also make those
No.
choices.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because the two like biggest career risks I've ever taken were leaving a job that was stable and steady and well paying
Hmm.
to lose 15 to $20,000 in salary, take a job with like no security, nothing. And knowing that it was the right thing and just
Hmm.
like I am know it in my gut when I don't listen to my gut, it never goes well. And it's always worked out for the better. But the last one was like I left a federal government job and like it was right before this, and I'd been, I guess, approved for this job they'd offered me. I said yes, and then I got offered like full-time permanent. We'll do all your French training. And my husband was like, yeah, like just heartbroken. But I was like, yeah, I like that was a wonderful job and a great team, and I know that I am not wired to do that forever. Great
Yeah.
experience, time over, get to do a new thing. So,
Yes,
yeah.
and you never know where some of those experiences will
Hmm.
lead you either. As you're talking, I was like, started in nonprofits. I worked in associations, consulting firms, doing advocacy, and then I also was an executive director for a little bit. And that's actually partially where I learned to run a business, right? Because
Yeah,
it's small, you do all the things, you learn all the pieces, you learn
yeah,
how to do budgets and work with vendors and like all of those things that
totally.
if you're in the middle of some corporation you just never see. And
Yeah,
so, you're also really setting yourself up, Katie, in the future if you want to have a career in entrepreneurship.
yeah. It's funny because and I wonder how much you must feel this, but like I used to think of like, oh, if you build things, you're an engineer. Or if you build things, like I realized oh, I'm building stuff. Like that's
Yes.
actually like you're building movement. That's cheesy. You're building better systems. Like building something from the ground up is kind of incredible. And in this job,
Hmm.
I think it will be the most unique opportunity that I'll
Hmm.
probably get over the course of my career. And it's just so interesting because I'm like, wow, I get to create. And that's
Hmm.
something that, creativity is so important to people. And I'm like, but I'm not painting or like doing whatever you think creation is, which is that in my brain. And I've realized like, oh no, I do create all the time, but it
Yeah.
just doesn't look like what like an artist, quote unquote. So
Right.
yeah, I think the satisfaction of building something or being an entrepreneur is it's so motivating to get to do something like that and use your ideas and make them turn into real things. Like, yeah, it feels very fortunate. Like, what a cool thing to be able to do in life. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about the challenge of working in a field like that, especially for those that are listening that may be in a similar field or have questions about
Hmm.
that, or maybe that they can apply to their own jobs too. So, in your field, of course, there's lots of trauma. There can be slow moving systems. We
Hmm.
talked about that a bit. Deep inequalities, right? You're seeing really difficult and sad things.
Hmm.
What does that take a toll on you? How do you protect yourself in that environment?
No, it's a great question. I would say now in advocacy land, it is not as taxing as doing frontline by
Hmm.
far. Like it's a different set of challenges for sure. But when I was frontline, like there were days where I was just like, I love the work and I love the people I worked with. And at the same time, like the depth of their pain and their experiences. Like I had a friend one time say, there's two Ottawas. Most people
Mm.
know one of them, and very few people know that there's a different city for a number of people.
Mhm.
And that city has gang violence and human trafficking and getting stolen and beaten up and not having housing and getting evicted. Like it's for anybody who's middle class, like that world is an
Mhm.
entirely different world. And so in
Yep.
a work context, I saw that world on a regular basis. And then the weirdness of, and now I go home at night and I, have like a home for starters. And so
Right.
like
And you have
managing
friends that are like, let's go to this restaurant. This city is so
exactly.
great.
Exactly. And so to like not feel guilty was like
Mm-hmm.
one thing to have to navigate. And it's not about you not having things, it's about everybody should have those things. Like everybody should have a good quality, dignified life where they can go out to a restaurant and go out and do things and be a part of community. But I think managing burnout, like super strong boundaries, everybody will tell you this. I think that we think of wellness and people talk about wellness as like meditation and yoga and all those things. It's all solo. And I think we forget that wellness actually really needs to involve community and
Mm-hmm.
connection. And like
Mm-hmm.
we miss that part and it's almost become this thing that's like just very insular. And that's not how humans are wired. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
an extrovert, yes, but my introverted friends say the same thing. Like, if I really want to navigate a painful or difficult or burnout situation, having a cup of tea and talking to a friend about it is going to
Mm-hmm.
do worlds more value to me than, a yoga class. And again, I'm not anti-yoga, but it's
Right.
just, I think we forget that community and connection is actually a really critical piece of wellness. And we
Mm-hmm.
focus more on kind of this individual kind of wellness that isn't really getting what we need a lot of the time.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I think that helped me, and I also think that when I moved into systems work, because I literally had been in a context where it was a matter of life and death with somebody responding or not responding, everything else can take a backseat when you're doing
Right.
paperwork and office work. Like this is not a matter of life and death. And it like sharpens your perspective pretty
Right.
damn fast when you're
Yes.
like, no, no one will die. That's the
Yeah.
standard of
Yeah.
what's urgent.
Yes.
And I find that really grounding when things
Mm-hmm.
feel stressful and overwhelming
Mm-hmm.
at this stage. So yeah.
I'm smirking a bit, and you're probably like, Stephanie, why are you smiling when I'm talking about these difficult things? And I am smirking because I often will say to people in advocacy, like, you're not a doctor. Like, we are not doctors. Nobody's
Hmm.
going to die here. Yes, it's
Yes.
important, and it's important to the fact that maybe you're doing systems work that's going to, does
Yeah.
impact people's lives and things like that, right? But like, you're not a doctor where like if you don't walk into that operating room at this very instant, so
Yeah.
it's something, we're often
Yeah.
trying to navigate to remind people like put things into context about
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
is actually an emergency and just given, some of that work that you were doing. How do you
Mhm.
navigate feeling like you're not doing enough all the time in a role like that?
I will forever not be on top of my email inbox. Like that
Hmm.
is
You're
like,
just like, I have
but
accepted this.
I have accepted it. But like I know this sounds silly, maybe for political affiliations, but I feel like Canada's relatively united in not loving Donald Trump. I had started this job relatively close to when he was elected in 2016. And not this job as an ED, but at the Alliance, I had a contract role. And he got elected. And I remember going into work the next day and being like, my God, I deserve to be at this freaking table. If that man is running the world, then I deserve a place at the table. And I know I'm trying my best and I'm working hard and I'm doing it with intention and integrity. And that's enough. And like, that's all we can ask anybody to do it. And I just remember feeling I never really had imposter syndrome, but I would feel like if I did, that was the antidote to imposter syndrome to see this like entirely not equipped human literally running the world. And,
Right.
I get insecure about me not doing enough. I'm like, oh my gosh,
You're
no,
like,
this
I've
should
got
not be the
this.
standard. So
Yeah.
I know that sounds like maybe ridiculous, but I just,
Uh,
you know what?
Sometimes
All
we
of
just
us
need
are doing
a
what we can.
comparator, right? A
Yeah.
comparator. Be like,
Yeah.
if they've got it, I've got it. I
Yeah.
often will hear people say, I just want, like, I forget the saying, but it's something about, like, I just want to do it as well as a mediocre man or something like,
Yes.
right? Because
Yes.
it's like,
Yeah.
you know, um,
Yeah.
it'll be interesting. Half of our audience is American, so I don't
Okay.
know how they're going to
I'm
feel about that, but
sorry. I'm
that's okay,
sorry.
Katie. Um, different countries, different cultural contexts,
Hmm.
and it regardless, he yes was a business person, but also was really big into reality TV. So in
Yeah.
any scenario, it is quite unusual that somebody
Not
like
his skill set
yeah
necessarily. Yeah.
would
Yeah.
become the president of
Yeah.
a country.
Yeah.
I want to jump into quickly chatting about homelessness and
Hmm.
what you think people need to know. So, what do you wish more people understood about homelessness in Canada?
It's solvable. It's
Mm,
very solvable. And Uh, there's a lot of things that we don't think about in terms of what solving it looks like. And I think a lot of it comes down to like philosophy, and approach. And for a very long time, our approach has been emergency, emergency, emergency. Like, let's put band-aids on a problem and not shift actually the direction of how we do things. So, a good example, and you can shut me down when I'm using too many stats, but a good example is in Ontario, we've increased funding by 34% in congregate beds. So, shelter beds in an emergency shelter, and we've increased homelessness by 32%. If you increase the crisis or the response to the crisis, you're only going to get crisis. And so we
Mm,
have literally invested in creating more homelessness. And when you invest in permanent housing options, when you invest in affordable housing, when you invest in support services, we see less homelessness. And
right.
so to me, there's an approach that needs to change, and there's also a paternalism that we have to shake if we want to start doing the right thing. And so the
Mm,
housing first is kind of the, nonprofit buzzword. We all say we're doing housing first. On basic philosophy, it's the idea that before you can figure out other things in your life, other stressors, other trauma, you need to have stable housing. You need to have
mhm,
safe, stable housing, and trying to get somebody to deal with other areas while they're sleeping in a shelter at night with 30 other people is not realistic.
right.
So that has been like Canada's standard. But I would say in recent years, especially since 2020, we've started to move back. We've slid back into this space where we're like, oh, we'll just make sure this person has this middle type of housing while we get them housing ready. And I'm
Right.
like, are you a human? You're ready to be housed. Like
Right. Right.
that readiness, like it might look like a kind of housing with tons of support, and maybe you need somebody visiting you every day, maybe you need to live with a number of other people in a supportive housing place with healthcare supports. It could look like a million different things, but no person is going to do better when they're in a precarious, unstable housing situation than if they were in a permanent housing spot. And so that to me is like the crux of it. We have to shift our perspective, and we
Hmm.
also have to remember it's solvable. It's also cheaper, and if we don't tackle the system element, we're not tackling homelessness. There's this
Hmm.
desire to fix a person, and it's actually about fixing the system.
Hmm.
But all of those things are doable, and Canada and the States have great examples of communities, very from the ground up, making that happen locally. And so I
Hmm.
think when you follow their example, they take a full collaborative systems approach with every agency in the community, and really focus on, are we making sure that this person is getting service in a coordinated way that's moving them into housing and support as quickly as possible. And when you see communities make that switch, you see results. Edmonton has done a great job, Calgary's done a great job, Milwaukee, Seattle, like there's so many great examples of it.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. It puts it down to just some of those basic bones about, what needs to change and where some of those opportunities are. I wanted to ask you a pretty simple question, but for many people listening, their only opportunity to interact with the homeless situation would be a homeless person on the street,
Hmm.
right? And your first reaction is, I want to do something to help. So, do you have
Hmm.
any advice for people when they're in that situation about what is the best way for them to take action?
So, first of all, I feel like all of us have the awkward moment. Like, we actually, for like, lots of people care, they want to do a good thing. And there's an awkwardness to it that's like, oh, should I get a coffee? Should I get, like, what should I do? Like, should I just give money?
Yeah.
And if
Should
I
I
can't do
donate? Like,
that,
it's just like, it gets very, yeah, you kind of
totally.
freeze, right?
You totally freeze. And there's like a very honest human care in that freezing. Because I think most people who are even having that conversation in their head, all of it stemming from, I want to help somehow. I don't know how to
Yeah. I
help,
want to
but I
help
want to
in
help.
the best way, but now I'm
Yes.
frozen.
Yes. And I think the first thing to like remember in that moment is full release of judgment. And so as soon as we get into a like, well, if I give them money, they'll spend it on drugs,
Mm,
then don't give them money, because the big difference between being poor and not being poor is when you're poor, people police every choice you make. And
mm,
frankly, if I was homeless, I would most likely be using substances. I probably have a significant history of trauma. Though there's a ton of people who are homeless now that like it is not the overwhelming majority of people who are homeless do not actually use drugs. That's not why they're homeless, but there is an increase in using once you become homeless.
Mm,
So I think that if you're wanting to give something, do it without condition. Don't do it with this expectation of like, well, I want you to spend it on this. If you don't feel comfortable giving money because of that reason, then be like, can I grab you coffee? Can I grab you a sandwich? But just to release the judgment of like what you expect that person to spend money on.
hmm.
And I think humans do the most logical thing to them in the moment, and we have to believe the same of someone who's homeless or poor. Like
Right,
they are making the strategic choice, even if it doesn't look strategic to anyone else, they
right.
are actually making the choice that's going to help them survive the most in that moment. And we have to believe people, even when it's really maladaptive or it seems like that's not a great coping mechanism. And it's like that might be the only coping mechanism they have access to. So like
Hmm.
let's respect that, and like full dignity and seeing people with full dignity means releasing that judgment and like I can
Mm.
help this way. So I think it's what a person feels comfortable with, but I think the number one thing is say hello. And sometimes people will be pissed. They'll be like, well, I need money. I don't need a hello, which I've encountered. So like fair point. Yeah, I know you need money. I don't have any on me, whatever. But I think just, acknowledging people and saying hello in a kind way is really valuable. I had a number of years ago, I was walking on my way. I think I was actually going to church, and this guy stopped me, asked if I had any money. I didn't. I was like, sorry, man, like I'm on my way to church. I don't know why I said that. And he's like, oh, can you pray for me? And I was like, sure, yeah, I'm happy to do that. And I said, what's your name? And he broke down crying and he was like,
Oh,
nobody has asked me my name in years. And it just made me be like, oh my gosh, like the
okay.
level of disconnection that this
And
guy was
humanity, like
feeling,
basic humanity.
basic humanity. Like the DMV makes you share your name. Like just how somebody could be so disconnected. And I was like, oh my
Oh,
gosh. So I was like,
yeah.
yes, Bruce, I will pray for you. Like,
Oh,
but like
yeah.
that just so struck me that
Mm,
somebody, had not had that simple interaction. And I thought it was nothing, I just, we're just having a chat. And, to be asked his name was incredibly valuable. And so,
wow.
I think just that human piece that's the starting point.
Thank you for sharing that. If someone wants to advocate or get more involved, like where should they start?
So definitely feel free to go to our website, endhomelessnessottawa.ca. But I think that a lot of it is learn your stuff, get a bit of a sense of the why of homelessness. The Canadian
Mm,
Alliance to End Homelessness is another good spot. In the States, National Alliance to End Homelessness are all doing really critical work. And I would say in Canada, we actually did, under the Harper government, the biggest study in the world at the time on what works. And basically, the summary was housing works, housing ends homelessness. And so that's at the Community Observatory on Homelessness. So a really good source to look at. And I think like learning about it in general and really trying to challenge your stereotypes and really trying to challenge there's a lot of paternalism in
mm,
charity and nonprofit land. And
hmm.
there's a lot of assumptions that I am fixing you. It is better for you to come and be part of services than to not access services.
Right.
We're seeing really great reductions in homelessness in Ottawa right now through diversion, which is a
Mm,
complete flip of philosophy. And it's somebody gets to the shelter door and you say, you can stay here tonight if you need to, but let's explore every other possible option because being here is worse than a lot of options. And
right.
like that's hard to say if you work there and in that context. However, it's also true. The second somebody enters a shelter door, they're going to be exposed to trafficking and substances, maybe get assaulted, lose their stuff, have it stolen. And it's a big shift to ask a sector to say, even though you're a whole lot of really good-hearted, thoughtful people, this system is harmful. And if
Like, how
people
do we
enter the
get the
system,
person the best help
yeah,
that they can have, the best
yeah,
chance?
yeah.
Yeah,
So I
that's great
really encourage
resources. Thank
people,
you.
yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you
I
for
really
sharing
just
some of that.
encourage people to like challenge how we think about it.
Right. Okay, well, let's jump into those rapid fire questions as we jump out of here. Can you share a rule you've broken that turned out to be a great decision?
Definitely, I know I mentioned it earlier, but definitely just leaving jobs that were better paying for lower paying jobs that were more aligned with how I'm wired. So I've done it twice. Neither
Yes,
was
you
appreciated by my husband, but they were both
you're
the right
making a
decision.
career of it. Who's
Yes,
a
yeah.
woman who continually inspires you?
So I'm very lucky. I have two. So my actual boss, so the chair of my board, Catherine Vandelin, is an executive director in Ottawa of a housing organization. I have learned so much from her about boundaries and wellness and like how to take care of yourself in this sector and also how to take care of the people around you in this sector and just
Hmm.
I've learned so much. She's so wise. I'm so lucky to work for someone like that. Like so lucky. And she really sets a tone where she goes in terms of emphasizing that with people. And you see people do it because she's modeling it. And then
Hmm.
I will say one other person, Dr. Carolyn Weitzman. She's kind of the foremost like housing expert in Canada in non-market housing. I have
Okay.
learned buckets and buckets and buckets of things from her, and she is a force. Like she
Oh,
was
wow.
in the University of Melbourne before now, and I have never seen someone, she just gets it done. Like she, A, knows everything and actually knows how to end homelessness, and B, just will meet with anybody, collaborate with anybody, like drives things forward. And I just
Wow.
find her so she's also a blast. She's also somebody who's like, I'm just gonna write true crime on the side because I have so much time.
Ah,
So just like, yeah, these incredible women that both amaze me professionally, but also have really rich lives, like personal lives. So yeah.
hmm. Thank you for sharing that. What's one book that has significantly impacted your perspective or your values?
So I have a number that, and nothing is fiction, which I was like, I should have fiction on here. But I would say uh the two that I really love, Dear Sugar, and it's a compilation of advice columns by Cheryl, can't remember that
That's
movie
okay.
was
We
written
can
about
look it
it.
up.
Yeah. Cheryl, what's her name? Reese Witherspoon was in the movie. It was a really big deal a while ago. But anyways, Dear Sugar was the advice column she wrote, and it's just so humanizing. Like everything she says is just coming from this place of such deep empathy, and also practicality. And I just love the way that she writes with just such care and just totally no judgment. And I think that's really, really special. And then another book by I don't think he's officially a priest, but he went through the priesthood and then I think left. I'm not totally sure. But this guy named Pedro Gautama, and he wrote this book called In the Shelter. And it's basically like his reflections on like faith
Hmm.
and spirituality. He's really into poetry as well. But again, he's in Ireland and he created this kind of intentional community called Corey Mila. And they found out the Gaelic meaning of it is actually lumpy hill, which I think is hilarious.
That is
But it's
funny.
actually about bringing basically, I guess, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland together after the Troubles in the
Right.
90s and
Okay.
navigating conflict and conflict resolution in an incredibly painful circumstance. And so there's so much compassion in how he writes and thoughtfulness. And I think just a very, again, like we're all dealing with the same stuff. We are
Hmm.
all human.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just really beautiful the way he articulates things. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that as well. Some great resources there and things to check out and maybe new people to connect with and follow. Thank you so much for your time today. I think just talking about your career, why you've chosen it, some advice for people who are maybe considering that field or maybe working in it and navigating, some challenging environments. And regardless of your field, that happens as well. And your expertise on homelessness as well and some of the things that can actually be done about it. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. No, it was a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us on Women Don't Do That. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating or review. Connect with us on Instagram at Women Don't Do That and visit our website www.womendon'tdothat.com for more details. Join our Patreon to support our work. Find all of the links in the show notes. Remember, you have the power to transform your what ifs into let's go. Together, let's redefine your possible. Until next time. The opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Women Don't Do That, Stephanie Mitten, or affiliated brands.